For 75 years, Israel has been both Jewish and democratic. The state we are facing now is that Netanyahu is going to destroy our Jewish and democratic state. This is a final call to get on board and to save Israeli democracy. Minor corrections to the judicial system in Israel? Well, I want to suggest differently. Netanyahu, in his media interviews, especially to the foreign media, because Netanyahu is not giving any interviews to public media in Israel, is stressing the minor steps that he's doing to reform the judicial system. What he is actually doing is transforming Israeli democracy from a vibrant liberal democracy, which is both Jewish and democratic, to an autocratic state in which Jewish supremacy is the one and only rule. He has a very clear model. This model is the model developed by his dear friend Viktor Orban of Hungary. But in Hungary, it took more than a decade for Orban to transform Hungarian democracy. He was following a 5-step protocol. And Netanyahu, these days, is following just the same protocol. The first item on this protocol is, of course, diminishing the independence of the judicial state. Well, in Israel, as Netanyahu knows, it's quite simple to do this regime change. Why? Because Israel does not have a constitution, which means that its basic laws are not enshrined in a constitution in a way that cannot be changed by a simple majority. And this is exactly what Netanyahu is using to change the rules of the game. How does he do that? Well, the first thing that he did is gave Yariv Levin, his Minister of Justice, the authority to change the system. Yariv Levin came with 4 basic steps. One of them has already passed, but the major one is just around the corner. And this is what they want to do. They want to make sure that the coalition controls not only the parliament, but also the appointment of judges. So this is the first thing that Netanyahu wants to do. But this is only the first item on the Hungarian protocol. The second item on the Hungarian protocol is limiting the free press. All the trials that Netanyahu is facing are actually to do with limiting and controlling the free press. So he has 2 directions in which he goes. One is to privatize, meaning to sell all public media to his best friends, the tycoons, so we can actually control what is being said, like in Channel 14 and in his radio channels and other media outlets. The other option is to nationalize all the different media outputs. What is Netanyahu going to choose? We don't know, because his Minister of Communication already put forward a motion to privatize all public media in Israel, which in effect means that Israeli public media would be abolished by Netanyahu and sold to his best tycoon friends so they could control Israeli media. The third point on the Hungarian protocol has to do with limiting the individual rights, individual civic rights, and of course harming minorities. How do they do that? Orban did it, and Netanyahu is planning to do it here through religious coercion, giving him more and more power. Already Netanyahu's government put in motion a legal system, which means that the rabbinical courts are going to be able to judge not only on religious issues, but also on other issues which are part of the civic, on the civic sphere. So the third option is very much a limitation of civic rights in Israel. The fourth, changing the electoral rules of the game. How did Orban do it? Orban changed the regions, so now it's almost inconceivable that his own party is not going to win elections. How is Netanyahu going to do it? Well, Netanyahu put in a motion coming from his government saying that in the next election it will be the decision of the coalition with no option for the Supreme Court to criticize this decision who's going to run and who is going to be not able to run. What is the major thing about it? Time after time, Netanyahu's government want to rule out the Arab parties in Israel. The Arabs are 21% of Israeli citizenship, and these are the people that Netanyahu's government is going to ban should they have the agreement of his parliament, which he controls with 64 votes in the Knesset. So thinking that, okay, we will wait 3 years and then we'll have a different elections and somebody else is going to win, well, this might not be an option if Netanyahu's plans are not stopped now. The fifth and final article on the Hungarian Protocol is limiting the critical bodies that are what democracy is about, meaning civil rights organization, culture, arts, and of course academia. Academia is already being damaged by Kish, Netanyahu's Minister of Education, because he's trying to appoint political actors into those bodies regulating higher education in Israel. Eventually, as we know from the Hungarian case, teachers and professors and lecturers are going to be selected according to their loyalty and not according to their academic excellence. If we don't want to get to that stage, we have to stop Netanyahu's Plan 1. And here is a major difference between what happened in Hungary and what is happening in Israel. Because in Hungary, it took more than a decade for Orban to gain this control over his country and to transform his democracy from a liberal democracy to what Orban calls a Christian democracy. For Netanyahu, in very short 7 months, he has already put into play 225 legislation pieces at different stages of the legislation, which try to do all the breadth of the 5 items on the Hungarian Protocol. So we have legislation about religious coercion, about limiting the academia, about limiting free speech, about taking as prisoners protesters without actually accusing them, and many, many others, such legislation which is already being processed. So it's not just a judicial coup d'etat, it is a full-blown change of regime. And we, as academics, as people of that support democracy, have an obligation to make sure that this plan of Netanyahu's government is being stopped. Because as I told you before, it is not just a judicial project. What Netanyahu actually is doing is taking the extremist of the extremists, the racist, those who believe in Jewish supremacy, those who do not believe in liberal democracy, those who think that the major enemy is Israel as being both Jewish and democratic, and putting them and giving them more and more power into their hands in the government. So if you look at his government, you see that it's composed of racist, of nationalist, of ultra-Orthodox people that want to get into the point that Jewish supremacy is what controls the rules of the game in Israel. What we know about Hungary and about Poland and about Turkey, that the protest in the streets and the reaction coming from the international community came too late. It was already in the motion, limiting the judicial review, limiting the critical bodies, and making sure that the tyrant, the new tyrant, is getting power to change his system of rules. What we're facing now in Israel is a very, very peculiar moment, because the Israeli people has been awakened, and for 32 weeks now, week after week after week, hundreds of thousands of Israelis are in the streets saying we have to stop this move. And it might be the case, with your help, that Israel may be the first, what we call near-miss change of regime. Because with your help, it might be the case that we Israelis might be able to stop Netanyahu from transforming a liberal democracy into a Jewish supremacy tyranny controlled by Netanyahu.